Friends, welcome to this episode of Leadosophy. You're here with an open mind because that's the rule, not the exception. Great interview coming up here with Cadet First Class Dylan Roberts of the U.S Coast Guard Academy. Cadet First Class is military slang for a senior in college. Dylan has some fascinating ideas about leadership. He's developed a leadership framework. We talk about followership and the importance of followership earlier in your academy career, and transcending through leadership up into your senior year, and then going back and forth between leadership and followership. We talked about his path into the Coast Guard Academy, which was not necessarily an easy one, and Dylan really opens up about that. Talk about life, leadership, philosophy, psychology, kind of hit all kinds of different facets. So I hope you like this interview coming up. Just over an hour. Here we go.
Are you ready to permanently fuse leadership and philosophy? Then a word of caution. You are about to enter the fully abstract yet wholly concrete realm of Leadosophy. Our ideas are not always so clear and distinct. To validate this proposition, we welcome the host of Leadosophy, Tim Woody.
Okay, welcome to Leadosophy, the Leadosophy podcast. I'm here with Dylan Roberts.
Thanks for having
me.
me.
Yeah, Dylan is here with an open mind because that's the rule, not the exception. That's how I start all my podcasts, Dylan, by the way. Little background about Dylan. Dylan is a senior at the Coast Guard Academy, or for military term, first class cadet, right?
Yes, that's correct. 27 days from billet night and 103 days from graduation. Not that I'm counting.
So many of our listeners may not have an idea about military or Coast Guard stuff. So explain billet night, and then I'll go back into the intro. What's billet night?
Absolutely. So billet night is going to be the night that my entire class finds out their selections. Starting in November, the slate comes out, and it's 260 picks. And then you basically create your dream list of the top 40 or 50 that you want to go to. And on billet night, you get your selection. You go up on stage, and there's a big screen behind you. Your boat comes up, or if you go to flight school or do cyber, and then they tell you to open your billet, and in front of everyone, it's live stream. You find out where you're going for your first tour.
That's pretty awesome. And obviously different this year with COVID. Normally this would all be an all hands event. Everybody would be in person, right? A huge event. This is a big deal.
So usually actually all the commanding officers will be there, and typically they'll give you a cover. So the first hat for your unit, and they'll be there to congratulate you, but they won't be there this year. We're looking to have it in person because at the academy right now, we're all in a ROM status. We're restricted on movement. So we haven't been going out on liberty or anything, and we're getting...
So you're restricted to the base right now?
I am, yes. Our entire corps is restricted to the base. No liberty whatsoever right now.
Man, nothing like restricting a bunch of college people to a confined space, right?
It's an experience.
Yeah, for sure. Dylan, you were born and raised in Maine?
I was, yes. So born in Portland, Maine. I went to
that's Vermont, but I have a moose on there. State animal, I believe, for Maine.
I went on a moose hunting trip one time. I got a moose when I was 13 years old.
No kidding.
Crazy story. But born and raised Portland, Maine. I went to Cape Elizabeth Middle School, high school, and been there my whole life.
And we're going to get into a little bit of your story, kind of how you ended up at the Coast Guard Academy. What do you major? Business and finance, right? Is your major, your background?
Yes,
or what do you want
it's technically management, but with a focus in business, finance, accounting, and then organizational behavior and leadership.
Right, that's awesome. And I read, you sent me some stuff on your bio. Your father was a firefighter.
He was, yeah. So my dad, Dan, he was 35 or 36 years as a firefighter, basically his whole life. Within the same department, ended up finishing as the chief. And so that was pretty cool to watch. He always did 48 hours, 24 hours on, 48 hours off. So didn't get to see him for a day, and then I'd see him for 2 days nonstop. But he was all about service. And then my older brother went to Maine Maritime Academy. He's currently an Army Ranger in the 75th out of Savannah. And I was going through high school at the time that he was at Maine Maritime. So just seeing what he was doing at the military academy too.
Sure, sure. So your parents still live in Maine, right?
They do. So right now they sold our house, the one that I grew up in, and they live at Shawnee Peak. So they moved into our camp. My dad built it himself when we were younger, and my dad's retired now, and my mom is currently teaching at Lake Region Middle School, which is pretty awesome.
That is awesome. What does your mom teach?
So my mom teaches math and science, and she actually was at Holy Cross, which is where I went to elementary school, a Catholic school, and she was a language arts teacher there. She worked for Hannaford Brothers. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Didn't like it, followed her career, followed her passions, went back to school to become a teacher, and she's been teaching now for 8 or 9 years.
That's awesome. Great stuff, man. I reached out to you a week and a half ago. I was reading your leadership framework on LinkedIn, and that was the first time I'd read one of your articles. And then I reached out and said, hey, you want to come on the Leadosophy podcast? And you agreed. I'm very grateful that you wanted to do this. And you pointed me to some other stuff that you had written. And it was deep, man. I remember I woke up one morning, I got the email from you, and I was reading this article on LinkedIn on some of the mental health side stuff that you'd been dealing with, and you were public about it and put an article on LinkedIn. And I remember I was reading this article, man, and it struck me. I was very intrigued by what you'd written, and the fact that you were willing to put yourself out there, man. That was huge. That was a huge step, obviously, for you to do that. So, do you want to talk about kind of your lead up to the Coast Guard Academy? Because a lot of people maybe have not read it. They don't know your story, how you ended up in the academy, and the difficulties or the barriers you had to overcome to get to the academy. It's all you.
Absolutely. So I always knew that I wanted to serve in the military. I wasn't sure what branch. I remember when I was younger watching Black Hawk Down and just feeling that, I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to do something. And then going into my sophomore year of high school, I was definitely struggling with depression, just thinking Maine in December, it's getting dark at 4 p.m. There's not a whole lot to do outside unless you ski or snowboard. Fortunately, I do. I couldn't during the week. And I was just going through a really tough time. And I had kind of no consideration at that point of how these decisions might impact my military career. But I made the decision that I didn't want to live anymore. And so on a November night, actually 7 years ago, and this past November, I decided that I wanted to take my life. And I tried to strangle myself. I tied a sweatshirt around my neck, and I was successful. And thankfully for my mom, she was home, and I texted my brother actually before I decided that I didn't want to be here. And I said, I love you. Thanks for everything that you do for me. This was my older brother. And I kind of tipped him off, but my mom came in my room, untied the knots, and I ended up going to the hospital. My dad was working, actually, part of the fire department, and got me awake, got me conscious, because I was unconscious at the time when my mom found me. And I spent a week at a psychiatric hospital, which is, when I think back to it, for the longest time, I tried to keep that part of my life to myself, because I just didn't want to be a part of that stigma, and I didn't want anyone to think of me differently. And so for a little bit of time, I was definitely struggling, but I was getting stronger. And I'd say the best part about it was that I learned a lot of coping skills. And I felt alone at first, but once I was able to go, and even at the psychiatric hospital, and just hear other people's stories, that was kind of step one, is hearing other people be vulnerable about their life and their struggles that they have. It allowed me to feel like I could be open and talk about my struggles and just my depression. And it's mostly seasonal, but just to have that kind of open conversation felt good. And then my parents, we were open to doing family therapy. So being able to talk to them, and that was kind of the toughest part, because dad, he's a really tough guy and not one to show emotions. So when I was growing up, I knew that I had to be tough and I couldn't show emotions. So I kind of let that build in. But fast forward my junior year of high school, I played baseball, and I was getting recruited by the Coast Guard Academy. And the coach sent me a message and wanted me to visit the academy. I did, and when I came here, I just fell in love, because just seeing how the cadets acted, seeing how disciplined they were, how mature they were, I said, this is the college experience that I want. And so leading into my senior year, I applied to the academy, and I found out that I got a conditional appointment. And so as with applying to academies and going into any military service, you need that DOB-MERP exam. And so I found out in December of my senior year that I got a conditional appointment. And then it was actually in March when I was home that I got a letter. And basically they said, thank you so much, but we can't bring you to the Coast Guard for the following reasons. And that was my suicidal ideation, and that was for psychiatric hospitalization. And so in that moment, I was crushed because I didn't really have another backup plan. And I was, fully focused on going to the Coast Guard Academy. And I thought, what am I going to do now?
You put all your eggs in that basket, the academy basket, yeah.
I did. Well, and the thing is, too, is I found out in December. So had I not gotten accepted to the academy in December, I still would have had time to apply to other schools. But I didn't really think of the impact of the medical exam in my past history, whether or not that was going to affect me getting in. So when I got that conditional, I was like, I'm in, I'm accepted, I'm going to be going to the Coast Guard Academy. And then their medical department said, no, you're not. And I went all the way up to headquarters, which was just really sad. And that was something that, I was at a crossroads because I really was determined on going here. And I basically had no path to go to the academy. So the first thing that I did was I reached out to the dean of admissions at the academy, and he told me that they sent a lot of their scholars. The academy has a scholar program to Marion, and he said you can go to Marion for a year, but that's
Alabama, right? That's a military school in Alabama.
It's in Alabama, yeah. Marion Military Institute. They do a 2-year community college and an ROTC program, but they also do a service academy prep program. So he said you can go there. There's no guarantee that you're gonna get into the academy or get your medical waiver. And I decided I'm gonna take that risk because this was kind of for me to decide, that this instance in the past isn't going to define who I am. And that was kind of the stigma that I was standing up for. And so I went to Marion, did an entire year down there in Alabama. And actually, while I was there, I applied to the Naval Academy and to the Merchant Marine Academy. And in that time frame of hearing back from the Coast Guard Academy, I actually got denied medically from the Naval Academy and Merchant Marine Academy.
Both of them denied you.
And both of them denied me for my medical waiver after a year of attending a military college. And so I was really down, but, I just figured I need to keep moving, and that I'm either going to move on and get over this, or I'm going to let something, that happened when I was 14 years old impact me for the rest of my life, which I'm not going to do. And then by miracle, I got a conditional waiver. So it's basically pending how I did during my swab summer here at the academy. And they gave me that temporary waiver and said, you're in, but it's not permanent. So don't get comfortable because we're going to be evaluating while you're here. And just the good side of this story is we had our commissioning physicals this fall, and I have a permanent waiver for commissioning. So I will be graduating and commissioning as a Coast Guard officer on May 19th.
That's awesome, man. What a just unbelievable story, man, up until now. How many days till graduation? Do you know exactly?
103 days till graduation.
Yeah, you guys are pretty much counting day by day. Well, it's almost getting down hour by hour, probably.
It is. Actually, this weekend we have 101st night and then 100th day. This is where the 4th class and the 2nd class go through one day of kind of swab summer, and then the freshmen get to be the kings of the academy for a day on Monday. And we're supposed to have a presidential graduation, so we might have Mr. Presidential President Joe Biden. So
that's a pretty amazing thing that's happening. It's going to be interesting with the COVID stuff, we're still going to be in the middle of it or if we're going to be towards the tail end. I hope it's as eventful as it can be given the circumstances. So this is a leadership podcast and a philosophy podcast, right? So let's talk about, you wrote in the article about your story. You wrote about the stigma behind mental health. I work at a behavioral health clinic. So I see that it's talked about a lot, and we're in a very remote rural area as well. So we have, our own challenges, but from a leadership perspective, as you start your Coast Guard career here very soon and you start going through the ranks, how will you lead through that? Because you may you may be in a leadership role where you have people that are dealing with mental health issues, whatever. How do you want to see yourself as a leader through that stigma, which is still there?
I would say just upfront, me being vulnerable, because that was the first time this November when I wrote my story publicly. I never told anyone, really. Even my best friends, when they read this, they were shocked. And the thing that surprised me was the amount of people that reached out to me, even strangers that told me their story. People that I didn't even know that just came up and through email or through messages and shared the most vulnerable parts of their life. And I didn't know them. And so kind of what that means to me is that as a leader, if you can see vulnerability as a strength, then the people that you lead and the people that you work with are also going to see that vulnerability that they can share with you. Because I found that people only want to go to the depth that you go to. And so if as a leader, you're not vulnerable with your people and you kind of don't share that personal side of you or those experiences, then your people can be struggling, but they're not going to want to feel that they can go talk to you and be personable. But just having that experience and being able to, share with one another, then that kind of forms a deeper and stronger connection. And if anything, I think through that vulnerability, there's just an added layer of respect. And people feel that they can trust you, and instantly you feel that, they care and they know that you care.
So having read your leadership framework, your teach, right? Teach is your leadership framework. The T is trust, right?
Trust and take care of.
Trust and take care of. So I've done a couple episodes on trust. I was actually interviewed last week on one of my coworkers is going to school at Cornell, and she was doing a leadership effectiveness interview, and trust was the first 3 questions she asked me. How do you develop trust amongst your team? How do you develop trust from a leadership perspective? And I talked about as well about you have to be able to open up a little bit. And everyone's going to be, and I don't know if you agree with this, but everyone is going to be at different levels as far as how much they want to open up, right? Some people like to keep it very superficial in a work setting, right? And then they go home. There's a very solid line between the work life, home life type balance. So to be able to open up at least a little bit, and like you said, being a little vulnerable, I think you said something that's really profound that allows other people to see that and not be afraid to open up a little bit. And you agree that builds trust, right?
Definitely. And I think there's a quote, it's by John C. Maxwell. And the quote is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with trust, is when they know that you care, then there's that formation of trust.
Yeah, that's really good. I think trust is very relationship dependent, but let's flip the script. Having been in the Coast Guard myself, now retired, I think there's another side of trust. And I think that's technical competence. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Yeah. So I know we talked about in your teach framework, credibility, right? You talked about credibility. And I think that's the personal side of developing relationships, but then there's the technical side. You have to have that technical competence to start building that credibility. When you start in any organization, you're new, and it takes a long time to build that credibility. But I found it interesting you were talking about credibility. I like that. And you linked credibility to trust in your framework. So you want to talk about credibility and trust and maybe how they go together for you?
Well, so one of the things, and it kind of ties all together, but where that credibility comes in is when I was growing up, I mowed lawns, and that was kind of how I did, or that's kind of how I made money in high school. I didn't work an hourly job and made $9. I worked basically mowing lawns, snow blowing driveways. And my dad always told me never do a job, halfway. He says, if you're going to do something, do it all the way through. Otherwise, don't even try and don't even start it. And that's kind of where your credibility comes from, because it's not going to be the things that you say, but it's going to be the things that you do. And people are going to notice that, whether you think so or not. And so to be credible, it's not going to be by any of the words that you tell people. It's going to be your actions. And I think that's kind of where it goes into the trust, because it can be nonverbal. They're going to notice, especially and I'm sure you can relate, but when I walk on board the first day as an ensign, I'm going to have to build their trust. And I can say that it's not going to be by the things that I say, but it's going to be how I present myself and, how I carry my demeanor. And I think that's kind of the credibility aspect of it.
So let's stay there. You graduate here soon. Let's envision you showing up to your new unit. You don't obviously know where you're going yet. What have you thought about this, or how are you going to start building that trust? And we talked about actions. Are you going to be seeking knowledge? What are you looking at focusing on when you go to your new job, your new unit as a new ensign? What are some things you're going to focus on specifically?
Well, so I've had practice with this. As a third class, I went to a small boat station, Castle Hill, and I'm just seen as a cadet and someone that knows nothing. And then this past summer, I showed up in Miami Beach at the Richard Etheridge. It's a fast response cutter. And so I kind of got to practice that. The first things for me was, one, asking questions. Two, even if you know something, don't tell someone you know it. Just be curious about it, because nobody wants to know it all. I'm fresh in the Coast Guard, and there's going to be people in the ranks that have been in the Coast Guard for 20 years. And so I think that's kind of giving people respect to, and just thanking them for taking the time to show you. And I think part of it, kind of in terms of being humble too, is just let them explain themselves. Also, getting to know your people. Something that I do, actually, I have a journal. And when I meet someone new, I try to get to know them, know their family, if they have kids. Something I'm big on is birthdays, so that when someone has a birthday, I always make sure to tell them happy birthday, because that's kind of how you can tell that someone cares about you. But I feel that it's not going to be about me showing up. It's going to be about how can I learn about them. And then that's kind of where the starting point is. And I know that a lot of people might not be exactly open to that, because the thing is I'm going to be replacing someone that's been there for 2 years that they really trust. So there's going to be a lieutenant junior grade leaving, and I'm filling his position, and they might have really liked him or her. And then they say, who is this new guy? And the only way that I think you can start building that relationship is getting to know them and just asking a bunch of questions and showing that you care and being humble and being really humble. That's kind of the main point.
That's great, man. I think you have the right frame of mind of just showing up with a sense of wonder and curiosity and eagerness, right? Just, you have to get after it. Especially I've seen many ensigns come into the new job, and it's a lot of work, man. I mean, I'm sure you know this. You guys have heard the stories. It's a lot of work, a lot of probably running around like your hair's on fire. But doing that with a smile on your face and staying positive and like you said, perpetually seeking knowledge, seeking mastery of craft. I think that's really important, and it sounds like you pretty much have that mindset ready to go. Let's talk about, we emailed back and forth a little bit about followership, leadership, right? That dichotomy between the two. Do you believe that you're going to have to focus probably more on followership in the beginning than leadership? How do you see that dichotomy playing out in your first year or so in the Coast Guard as a new ensign?
So I think one of the first things, and they preach this at the academy, is get really close with your chief's mess and find your mentor kind of between followership and leadership. Because again, you're going to know a lot of people. And for instance, within the first 6 months, I'll probably be a division head. And with that, there's going to be people, again, that have been in the Coast Guard for a long time that have more knowledge than I do. And I'm their boss. And they report to me. And I'm 22 years old, and they're 45 years old. And so it's going to be the configuration of both. And
does that intimidate you a little bit about going into a position where you're so much younger than someone? They may have way more technical competence, but you're still in a position of leading them. Does that, I guess, kind of open it up a little bit? Do you have fear, anxiety about doing that? Excitement? How do you feel about that?
So I'm actually really excited. I don't have any fear or kind of stress about it. And the reason I say that is because I want to go in with that humble mindset, because they're the technical experts. And so I'm automatically going to be putting that trust in them that they know what they're doing, and I'm going to be asking them, and I'm going to be relying on them and show and stand up for them and support them. And I think that's kind of where it separates maybe being nervous or not being nervous, is that, I recognize and I'm cognizant that I am new here and they have more knowledge than me. And I'm not scared to, upfront say that and say, I know that your department head when that time comes, but I know that you have the knowledge that I don't have, and I need to lean on you for that. And that, I hope, maybe brings a sense of purpose to them and lets them know that, I really care, and I'm acknowledging the things that they know and their time valued in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And you're going to be around a lot of people with a lot of knowledge. And I think when I look back on my Coast Guard career, Dylan, it was being a small service. And like I said, I can only have a Coast Guard experience. I don't have any other services, but just that team dynamic, not wanting people to fail. I've seen a lot of chiefs that will do whatever they can to help out the junior officers and, make sure that they're part of the team. And I've just had a lot of positive experiences with that. So I think you're going to be in good hands wherever you end up going. Are you looking to go on a ship? What do you look at it doing? What's your career path taking?
I am, yes. So I put in for all deck watch officer billets. I just like being up on the horizon, being able to always see the sun and sunrise, sunset. That's the best part. Nothing against the engineers because we need them, but I just couldn't be down in the engine room. I like seeing the horizon, and I find a lot of beauty in that. So I put in for all 270s, 210s, and all on the East Coast, actually, from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, all the way down to Key West, Florida. I have no preference where I go. I think no matter what, the experience is what you make of it. So I'm just excited to figure out so that I can start moving forward with that process. And the reason I kind of want to set myself up in that way is I know that being on a 210 and a 270, you really have that chief's mess, and you have senior officers that you get to learn from. And then I think that that'll kind of set me up maybe for kind of more diversity and experience by just having such a larger crew, so that maybe down the road I can also be like an executive officer or commanding officer of a small boat. Because I would either like to go XO of an FRC after for my second tour, or command of an 87, but I got to make it through the first tour, obviously. But that's just something that I'm looking at right now, at least in terms of the timeline.
Well, it's good. You got to have goals, man. Short-term goals, long-term goals. It's good to try to map out kind of what you want to do. Is there one Coast Guard mission with Coast Guard? We had, obviously there's many statutory missions we do. Is there one mission in the Coast Guard that kind of excites you more than others? Search and rescue, law enforcement. I know you did some stuff down on the Richard Etheridge. What do you like to do in the Coast Guard?
I think something that excites me is a search and rescue mission. And law enforcement is really fun because it's kind of an adrenaline rush as well. But even on the Richard Etheridge this summer, we repatriated over 90 migrants. But the reason that excites me is because I look at it as solace, safety of life at sea, and knowing that even though they want to try to make it to the United States, that we're saving them because they're in these small boats that really can't float. And one of them this summer is sunk, and there's survivors. We got there pretty fast. But to just think that, what about the boats that don't make it? And then also just knowing that people trust the Coast Guard. When the Coast Guard shows up on scene, they're saying, I'm safe now. They're going to save me. And so it's just that part of doing the humanitarian mission. That's what really excites me in being in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest draws, right, for people coming in the Coast Guard, is being able to be in a position to save a life. I've always said, long after retirement now, there is no greater feeling that I have ever experienced than saving a life. Bar none, there's nothing even close to it. And then on the flip side, when you're not successful, it sucks. But that was probably the greatest experiences, especially when you do it in a team dynamic. When you're saving a life as a boat crew, obviously the air side, they get it too. But man, when you come together, when a mission culminates with a boat crew and that teamwork and that leadership and the followership, and it all, kind of reaches a pinnacle when you actually do save someone's life and save the property. And man, there's no greater feeling that I've ever had. it's pretty epic. So what about, we talked a little bit about philosophy and psychology, and you said that kind of helped you through the mental health side of becoming stronger mentally, more mentally fit. Do you still have a draw to psychology, philosophy? Do you think it helps you as far as a leadership role? What are your thoughts on that?
I do. So for me, it started kind of after that incident. I want to say in the spring. And the first book that I read was Unbeatable Mind by Mark Divine. And when I read that book, it kind of almost reminds me of David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. But it was just kind of finding strength within myself. And then as I continued to grow, I kind of wanted to learn more about myself. I read a book, Why People Die by Suicide. I read the book Mindset by, I believe it's Carol Dweck. And I thought that there was a lot of growth and a lot of learning and understanding maybe why I make the decisions that I make.
Carol Dweck was a growth mindset, right? That's a growth mindset.
Correct. Yeah. So growing your kind of stationary mind. And that really fascinated me. And I was actually, so the whole reason I got into philosophy was I was reading this book, 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And there was a quote in the book, and it says, oftentimes we suffer more in imagination than we do in reality. Oftentimes we suffer more in imagination than we do reality. And that was by Seneca the Great. And I said, I need to know who this Seneca the Great is. And he was a Stoic philosopher. And I said, what is Stoicism? I had no idea. And so that summer, actually, I was on the Bark Eagle, my third class summer, right after the Small Boat Station, Castle Hill. And I downloaded the book, A Guide to the Good Life by William Irvine. And that was the first philosophy book that I'd ever read. And I had to read it again. Right after I read it, I was like, I'm going to read this book one more time. And the things that I got out of it, just understanding what I can control and the things I can't control, and really where I place my worries, as well as kind of, being real with yourself. I found that helped me grow as a leader a lot. I also began to stress less because I knew that if something was outside of my control, why spend the time and energy to get upset or get stressed about it? And then realizing that I'm the one that's in control of my emotions. And for instance, you could say anything you wanted about me, but I have the action and I have the ability to decide if that's going to make me happy, sad, or upset, because nobody has that power over me but me. And kind of once I started getting in that mindset, I think it helped me as a leader too, because I think it kind of helped me keep my pose. And, I wasn't a stressed out person. I didn't feel anxious. And it was a big part of my learning.
Stoicism is it's obviously, it goes back a long time. Seneca's Six Pack, I highly recommend and it's not a beer. I think Seneca's Stoic Six Pack is a pretty good read. There's a lot of great stuff on Stoicism. Some people don't like Stoicism. They think it's too hardcore and it's not realistic. Like I said, I tend to really enjoy the writings of Seneca. Anyways, kind of go off on a little philosophy tangent. Leadosophy is the fusion of leadership and philosophy. So I'm glad I like to talk a little bit about philosophy when I can. Let's talk about leading self, because it's part of the curriculum at the academy. Maybe we can get into the leadership at the academy, the curriculum. What are kind of the cornerstones of the leadership curriculum academy? Can you kind of what's it like? Maybe someone who might be thinking about going to the Coast Guard Academy, what's the leadership formal training look like, informal training? Can you map that out a little bit?
Absolutely. So you start obviously as a follower. Really, you start SWAB summer. You go to the academy in June and you do a 7-week basic training, 7-week boot camp, as you would. And you don't even have to think for yourself because they tell you exactly what to do. And you don't need to think, they just tell you and you do it. And then all of a sudden you're fourth class 7 weeks later and people aren't telling you what to do all the time. And then you kind of start having to figure it out for yourself again. And you have to manage your own time because your cadre aren't leading or micromanaging every minute of your day, which is different. But basically your fourth class year, you're kind of just responsible for yourself. You're trying to make it through. At the same time, every week they have indoctrination exams, and that's on Coast Guard knowledge. And at the end of the year, you take a indoctrination exam that's cumulative. That's all of it, and it's called boards. And that's how you get carry on. And for those that don't know, the entire fourth class year, you're squaring your corners, you're squaring your meals. You actually don't get social media, so you have to delete all your social media accounts. And
so this is the equivalent of being a freshman, right, in college.
Yeah, so this is your freshman year.
Right.
And you really only have each other because there's these fraternization rules where freshmen can't be friends with the third class and upper class. So basically, you can only be friends with fourth class. So you can't go hang out with an upperclassman or a sophomore or relax with them. And so it really is only you guys as freshmen. But the thing that's really unique about it is you're all going through it together. And nobody has it any easier than the person next to you, which is a really nice feeling. And so you kind of like start building those relationships. And you are a follower because you kind of just, you do what they say, but at the same time, that's kind of where the leading self happens. Is this is a time in your life where you're really focused on just yourself because you're not taking care of any divisions and you don't have other people that you really have to focus or lead. And they want you to just learn and grow and get used to the atmosphere. As a third class, you kind of go into that mentor role for the fourth class. And this is kind of the first time where you realize that somebody below you is watching everything that you do. Because as a fourth class, you're looking at all the upperclassmen, and the seniors are like God and goddesses, just what you look to be one day. And your third class are kind of mentoring you in a way so that you can pass your boards. They're responsible for you. And that's kind of the first part of having responsibility is when you have a fourth class in your division that you need to make sure they're passing their boards. And if they're not passing their boards, it's not necessarily their fault, but they're going to be holding the third class accountable. So you're going to start getting that accountability aspect. And then going from your third class year to your second class year, that's kind of the big leadership transition at the academy. We take this class called LAMS, it's Leadership and Management School, and it's during our summer. And that's when we take our DISC profile and learn that. Actually, we take a class called Organizational Behavior and Leadership our sophomore year and start kind of learning these methods like Tuckman's model on followership and leadership and building teams, and then Maslow's hierarchy. And then we do the values and action survey so we know what we value and the things that really attract us and kind of develop or really make us who we are. But then going into our second class year, we're kind of more in that leadership role because you are the cadre. So you're leading these fourth class now through that SWAB summer evolution. And that's where you're leading divisions for the first time. You're leading these fourth class and they're going to do what you say. You can say, jump, and they're going to say how high. And that's when you really realize that you have, leadership or power or how you want to call it. And I think that's where the followership to leadership role changes, because this is the first time that you're really using your leadership dichotomy or your framework. And the framework that I created that as a third class before I was even a leader, really within a position. And
this is the TEACH framework, right?
This is the TEACH framework. And I want to say that a lot of the framework came from my experiences as a fourth class and a third class. I would always write everything down, the good experiences and the bad, because there would be leaders here that I really liked. And I said, I want to be like them someday. And then there were some leaders that would just drain my energy. And I would come back to my room at the end of the day and be like, wow, like they really just are out for me or want to make my life miserable. And I wrote down in my book, in my leadership book, that I promised I would never be like that person, or that I would never have those traits, because I never wanted to make somebody feel the way that I felt from that person. And so that was something that really stuck to me. So when I was a second class, acting as a cadre with the SWABs, I would remember my SWAB stories and my SWAB experiences when a cadre would make me feel bad with no purpose. And so through that kind of cadre summer, if there was a fourth class at the time of SWAB that wasn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, I would take that corrective action. I would let them know why I was going to be making them do push-ups or whatnot. And I would always do them with them. I would never make them do anything that I wouldn't do with them. And I would say, you're not supposed to do that. They would get it. I would make them repeat it. And I would say, "You're going to do it again," and they'd be like, "No." And then that's kind of where they learn their lesson. But it always had purpose behind it. So I would never just pick on someone because it would just be finding that discrepancy. So that was kind of first role in leadership. It was really awesome, really a raw experience because you're going into this and they really will listen and do everything that you say. And then as a senior, while you're looking forward to graduation and might have senioritis, really the thing is you're not leading a division during the academic year. So this past year, I've been in van maintenance division, and I maintain the cadet vans, make sure that their insurance is up to date, get them oil changes, do the logs, the gas mileage, all of that. And
all the mundane stuff but still has to get done, right?
All the mundane but has to get done. I'm in transportation department, so but that's my academy experience and just some of the leadership that I've learned.
So it seems to me, listening to you talk about that experience transitioning from a fourth class cadet to now as a first class in your senior year, it's been this transformation of followership through the spectrum to leadership. With even now, I'm sure you still have moments where you're in a follower's role and you have to embrace both of them, but definitely there is a clear glide slope, I guess, of going up towards more leadership focused, vice in the beginning, more followership focused. Is that accurate?
I would say that's accurate. I would say too, my framework's not my framework, but for instance, my Myers-Briggs, I took that as a third class cadet, and it's crazy just knowing how much I've changed from my sophomore year, my third class year, to now being first class. Because when I took it the first time, I didn't have any leadership responsibility. I wasn't ultimately responsible for anyone besides my fourth class at the time, the fourth class in my division, and just making sure that they were passing their indoctrination exams. And then taking it now as a first class, it's different because my role has changed. And so that kind of the way that I've been for the last 2 years has been constantly evolving and constantly changing.
Is there one specific area in the Myers-Briggs is a personality test, right? Personality test. Is there one specific area of the Myers-Briggs or your personality that you really noticed changed? Is it specifically that you can talk about?
So what changed the most actually was going from thinking to feeling. And a lot of that was because as a follower, I would just do, and that was kind of the thinking aspect. But then more so as a leader, and I guess with a follower too, I didn't want to be vulnerable. So going back to the vulnerability, I didn't want to be vulnerable with anyone. And there'd be no reason for me to just share with my first class or my second class cadet kind of my experience, because I figured, what if they judge me? What if, they think differently of me? But then as I got into that second class and first class role, I started showing my compassion and my empathy to my second class, my third class, my fourth class, and letting them know that I'm a real person and that they can really come to me anytime they're struggling or need help. And then this year, so November, my first class year, I wrote my story and I published it. And a lot of cadets have read that story now. And so I want to say that that's kind of the part that changed the most is that feeling and that kind of caring attitude of everyone in the Corps. And I feel that I'm in the position that I can do that. And people will notice and people will say, wow, it's courageous for a senior cadet to be so vulnerable, when that's not typically something that, a senior would do, is be outright vulnerable in kind of their emotion and their stories.
All right. I want to stay on the followership side for just a little longer because I want to unpack it a little more. First question to you, just kind of get your intuitive reaction. Do you think to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower?
I want to say that it goes hand in hand, because even my framework, it's not specifically gauged towards followers or leaders, but I want to say the word that kind of comes to mind is being coachable. Because the thing is as a cadet, when I was playing baseball, I had to be coachable, but at the same time, I would mentor Little League baseball players. And so I'm kind of a follower, but kind of a leader too, and within the framework. And I think it's transverse. I think it goes both ways, because your role is going to be constantly changing and evolving, and you can't just be adept to one. But you need to kind of, going back to some of the frameworks, is just constantly be thinking about, like, how can I be an effective follower and leader, and kind of not be sheepish or, not be someone that feels comfortable to speak up no matter the situation. Because I think no matter your position, everyone's kind of that natural or has a natural leadership ability in them. But at the same time, sometimes where I am, I'm a follower and a leader. And that's just kind of my take on it.
No, that's good stuff. Let's get your advice. If you had a young man, young woman, they were thinking about going to one of the service academies, Coast Guard Academy, we'll use that example since you're there. What would you tell them if you had to give them if you were to talk to them about being a good follower or being an effective, you talked about effective followership, effective leadership. I think effective leadership sometimes is kind of hard to define. It's hard to pin that down. But if you had to mentor somebody who was coming into the Coast Guard Academy, what would you talk to them about as far as effective followership goes? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think the first thing, if somebody wanted to go to the Coast Guard Academy, the first thing I would say ultimately outside of that is you got to do it for yourself. So that's kind of something that, and the reason I say that is that's something that sometimes happens is people are doing it for their mom or their dad or because it seems prestigious. But at the end of the day, those aren't going to be the things that carry you through here. It's going to be your own willpower and your own drive and, being here for the right reasons. But secondly, one of the things that I would say is talk openly to your leaders in your first class. It's going to be hard, and it is really hard as a swab is, you're not going to be telling a cadre, why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this? But also to know as a leader that you want to effectively communicate to your swabs and to the forecast why you are doing what you're doing and what the purpose or mission is behind it, so that they aren't thinking, are we wasting our time here? What is this? But to be able to have those conversations moving up the chain. And that's kind of something that I was maybe more passive about as a fourth class. But when I was at the Richard Etheridge this summer, as a follower, I was just trying to take in as much as I could and ask questions and be effective and say, how can I best do my job? Or how can I best help the crew? Where am I needed at? And through that followership and just kind of taking that initial lead as a follower and just acting behind, they put me in leadership roles. And I got to be a QMO, and I got to do deck during an import evolution, during a special sea detail. And I think a lot of that was because as an effective follower, I wasn't just saying like, okay, thanks, like I'll do that. I was asking, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? And suggesting good ideas too, because followers, you got to think your natural leadership too, and saying, why are we doing this way? And just as you kind of talk about too, is just being curious.
Yeah. And I think you kind of said something profound about being able to ask why as a follower. A lot of people, it's that intrinsic human curiosity, wanting to know why you're doing something. And I think from a leadership perspective, from the perspective of a leader, you have to ensure you're creating the environment where people are confident and comfortable to ask why. And there's some times where you just have to do something, right? There's going to be times where time is of the essence. We don't have time to have a big democratic discussion about what's going on. But then there are other times where maybe people are doing something and they don't really understand why. And once you get that why, it does kind of help. And I just like the fact you brought that up. That's something you were focusing on for the swap summer when you were in the leadership position. So that was good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, and one of the things I think about too, one of the things that I've learned is kind of the 5 whys. And that's really how you get to the root of anything too, especially for somebody's motivation. Is, if you want to go to school somewhere, why? Well, because I like it. Well, why? Well, it's a good education. Well, why do you care about having a good education? Because I want to get a good job. And kind of just that's how you can unravel too. Not so much on the followership side, but that's just going towards deepen your understanding for someone's motive or why they actually want to do something. So it's called the 5 whys. Pretty interesting, but that's just getting the depth or adding the depth to any decision making.
That is also very handy as far as a systems thinking approach to fixing processes. Trying to find the defection or the defectiveness in a process is asking the why. It's got a lot of import, both from a leadership perspective and a management perspective. So little bonus there for bringing that up, the 5 whys. Let's see. Let's talk about what do we want to talk about here? Let's talk about your leadership framework. We'll start winding it down here. We've been going for about an hour. Let's kind of wrap this up with teach. What do you want to talk about teach, and what are some points you maybe want to get out there for others so they can understand? Which I think is fascinating. You had to do this framework your sophomore year, right?
I did. So a lot of this was from my framework, crazy to say, but as being a follower, through watching the leadership that I've kind of been under and, collaborated with, this is taking out of experience without me actively using teach. It was more so seeing the upper class, seeing officers in the fleet and saying, this is the kind of leader that I want to be. And just part by part, taking all of that. And then that's kind of how I got to my framework. But so teach, trust and take care of, enrich, engage, and encourage. The A is act and achieve. C is consistency, communication, and creativity. And then the final pillar at the bottom is honor. But I think with anything, so trust and take care of, we've kind of talked about the trust, but take care of your people. As I said before, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so when someone really knows that you care about them, then they're going to want to show up for you. Enrich, engage, and encourage is that when giving feedback, one of the best things I found too is it's always nice to encourage someone. Even if they're off the path, they're not doing the right thing, is encourage them, engage with them, and enrich their experience. Is that everyone should always be able to bring something with them. Because if you have an experience or you go to your first station and you feel that you didn't bring something with you, in your tool bag, what was the purpose of that? And so that's kind of where you need to enrich your experience and engage. Act and achieve, this kind of goes to the creativity part too, kind of hand in hand. But as I always say, ideas are worthless. And so if you want to do something and you're passionate about something, you got to act. You got to act on, that desire or that idea that you have in your head, and never be afraid to speak up. Because those ideas could be really great, and it doesn't matter who they come from, whether or not it's at the bottom of the chain or the top of the chain. To be able to feel comfortable to act and achieve, you're gonna at first, have to speak up and talk on those ideas. Consistency, communication, creativity. So consistency is just, showing up early all the time, having a good uniform. Communication, just keeping communication. And always, I want to say, like, one of the best parts is transparency, because you want to establish that why with your team, and you don't ever want to kind of be in that position where you're just having them do something and they don't know the why, or you're not communicating with them and something pops up and they had no idea because you weren't really transparent as a leader. It's kind of something in the Coast Guard is it's a need to know or you don't need to know.
Right.
But having that communication is really going to allow people to feel more comfortable, and it's going to help them and help you. And it's just going to help kind of the dynamic of the team. And then creativity, kind of going back with the act on the ideas, is just creative ways. I don't think there's one right way to do something. And for me, that would be, as a leader, saying, if we have to, say, paint the boat, you can come in on Monday and you guys can stay until 8 p.m. and grind it out Monday, Tuesday, and then, you can go home early Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It doesn't have to be an 8 to 4. You don't need to waste people's time, and let them kind of take the initiative, because I think autonomy, mastery, purpose, while autonomy is a big thing, is that I don't like to do things in just one way. And, I think the poorest excuse is, well, this is the way we've always done it. And
I hate that. My wife is cringing right now. She knows I hate that.
Yeah, it's awful, because it's like, well, what if I have a better way? What if I can do it in a more effective manner? So allow people to be creative. And I think that that's where you're really going to thrive. And I think, too, this pandemic, looking at big companies, Google, Amazon, Apple, having people work remotely, too. Like, allow people the autonomy, and they're going to feel that they have a bigger intrinsic motivation to want to work for you. Because a lot of times it's not the money. People want autonomy in their life. And if you can give them autonomy in the military, it can be hard because the rank structure to, justify that. But giving people autonomy is really important. And then last but not least, this is really important, is honor. And for me, it's it's honoring the uniform, honoring, United States Coast Guard, because you're not representing just yourself. You're part of something bigger than yourself. So you're honoring everyone that has joined the long blue line before you, everyone that served before you, that paved the way, the Coast Guard, the military, the United States. And then also lastly, your last name, because you have two names on your uniform. It's the United States Coast Guard, and then it's for me, Roberts. And I want to honor that name, and for my parents and everyone else. And that's kind of the selfless act, selfless service of the Coast Guard, just doing something bigger than yourself, but honoring it, and really taking pride in it, because especially for all branches, like, people have died in that uniform, and so you're honoring them in the long blue line, and that's really important to me.
That's awesome, man. That's very profound. I love diving into the world of leadership philosophy, especially. And I've always said, if you should always try to pen your leadership philosophy, and maybe people need to pen a followership philosophy as well. But I think by putting your ideas and thoughts on paper about how you want to lead, how you see yourself leading, and maybe some of the philosophy and psychology behind that, how you believe, what do you think about human motivation? How are humans motivated? Right? Because that goes a lot on how you lead. Do you think people are extrinsically motivated, or do you think that people can determine their own motivation? You know what I mean? So I like the fact that you got, does everybody have to do that? Have to pen a leadership framework or come up with one?
They do, yeah. So this is actually part of the OB&L curriculum as a third class. As I revised it 2 years later, not a lot of it's changed. But when you talk about the intrinsic, extrinsic motivation, great book, Drive by Daniel Pink. I actually emailed him and conversed with him a little bit about how can you create intrinsic motivation in the military. If as a senior officer you tell, say, a first class cadet that something has to be done, and then you have to tell your division, how can you intrinsically motivate them to do something in that fashion? Because I think the greatest story in that book is when there's the little boy that didn't want to paint the fence, and then somebody else wanted to paint the fence, and he said, no, I want to do it, because he didn't want him to paint the fence.
Right.
And I think that in order to be a good leader too, people are going to want to follow you once you take the uniform off. And sticks and carrots ultimately at the end of the day isn't going to work. So you got to find ways as a real leader be able to lead with your uniform off, because at the end of the day, when you get out of the Coast Guard, your commanding officer or your XO, once you take that uniform off, you can be like, cool, great, bye, thanks for 2 years, or you can be like, wow, I really look up to them and they're a great leader, and I'm really happy that I get to serve with them and under them.
Well, you talked about going down this road of intrinsic motivation. You've written about finding your purpose, finding your why. You want to talk about that a little bit? So it's a heavy.
Two important days in your life: the day you're born and the day you find out your why. Is that the quote?
Yeah, that's the quote. That's the quote. Yeah.
And so I think my why is serving that bigger purpose and kind of doing that selfless act to serve others, because every day I feel I'm doing a purposeful job. And right now I'm at the academy. So I'm not out in the fleet saving lives actively, but I'm preparing for that. I think, and you asked me this question too, I think that your purpose changes definitely throughout life. And when you get married, your purpose is going to change. You want to be a good husband. When you have kids, your purpose is going to change because you want to be a great father. Great quote, the best gift that you can give your kids is to love your mother. I love that one. Yeah. But I think that your purpose is always changing. But in such, doing something meaningful every day, random acts of kindness. And it can be small purpose or big purpose. But I think that as long as you're doing something to help others, and this was a quote that Dave from Angels 14 said to me, is when you're not feeling that great about yourself, help others. And I think that's perfect because, if you can't figure out your purpose or you don't know your why or you're struggling with that, then don't focus on yourself, help others. When I was in high school, I did aftercare. I worked with students and kids in elementary school that had special needs. I was a one-on-one provider. I did the aftercare program, the summer rec camp program. I started babysitting and getting involved with their development. And I think that was the kind of part that held me together, was when I'm not feeling great about myself, I knew I was helping them, and they were my motivation and they were my why. And I think it constantly changes, but as long as you find something, your purpose, you know, just know.
Do you think you can help other people find their purpose from a leadership perspective? Discover?
I think a lot of people kind of know what they want to do. I think people are scared to act. And I think that, in order to...
What do you mean scared? Can you unpack that a little more? What do you mean scared to act?
So I would say that, for instance, failure. Failure is a great thing. And I love failure because I love just failing and learning. But a lot of people are scared to fail. And when you're scared to fail, you can't be open to your ideas. And again, kind of that creativity and acting on it in my framework is that if you have something that you really are passionate that you want to do in your life, what's stopping you? And is it what other people think of you? There's hundreds of people that have a perception of you and who you are as a person. The only one that matters is you. What do I think of myself? What does Dylan Roberts think? What does Dylan Roberts want to do? And I think that you're going to find your purpose and your passion once you block out all that other stuff, because it's kind of that tunnel vision. You wouldn't believe how many times I was told that I wasn't going to be able to join the Coast Guard and I wasn't going to be able to go to the academy, but I wasn't going to let that define me. And right then and there in that instance, I could say my purpose isn't to be in the Coast Guard and to help others in that fashion. But I had such tunnel vision that I knew that nobody was going to stop me. And I read articles about people that got disqualified and that couldn't join, and kind of like Reddit posts about how it's a permanent disqualification. You shouldn't even try. But I didn't stop, and I wasn't scared to fail, and I didn't care if I spent 1 year of my life doing something and ended up not working out, and I went to Marion. I would have found another passion, and it might not be right away, and that's okay. But if you're not feeling that great about yourself, help others. But just know, don't be afraid to act on what you want and your passions. And it's never too late.
Never too late. I agree, man. That's good stuff. Any final words of wisdom for maybe a cadet that's struggling, or maybe they don't think they can get through it? What's Dylan have to say as a senior? You're almost done with this journey of your college career. Parting words of wisdom for someone who, maybe 2 years behind you, or they just can't see light at the end of the tunnel.
So when I don't see light at the end of the tunnel, it makes me think of swab summer is I would look forward to every meal. And that was kind of how I got through the days. And then before I knew it, the weeks passed by, and then before I knew it, swab summer was over. And it's crazy because now I'm at the end of that 4-year journey. And so a lot of times people will feel stuck. But if you can just kind of wake up every day and, tell yourself that you're going to do just one thing, and it doesn't have to be for yourself. It can be for another person. You can be going through a drive-thru and you can help someone through a random act of kindness. Is that if you just do one thing every day, whether or not that's reading. So right now, actually, I'm doing the gallon challenge, drinking a gallon of water every day and reading for at least 30 minutes.
I haven't heard of that, the gallon challenge.
It's awesome. It's really great. And I'm also doing at least 30 minutes of cardio a day. I make sure that I get that in because you're never too busy. There's 24 hours in a day. And that's kind of where just, if you feel that you're struggling, don't stay still. Get out of your room, go interact with people, get to meet someone new, learn about someone, be vulnerable, be open, tell someone that you're struggling, but do so with a positive mindset. Because I think that a lot of it, and the only way that you're going to change is if you want to change and if you want to grow, because you can be stuck and you can find a zillion reasons why you're not where you are, and you can blame yourself, but at the same time, if you want to get unstuck, you got to kind of take that risk and take that challenge upon yourself that, have a mantra, say, nobody can stop me. And if I want to do this, then I'm going to do it. And I'm great. And just keep saying it. And as long as you keep saying it, then, you'll be great. And you already are great, but just don't stop and just use that mantra. Find your mantra.
Words of wisdom from Dylan Roberts. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I'm sure there's someone out there, man, that you'll speak to directly by saying that. Because like I said, we all have days where it's just like, man, it's a struggle. It's a grind, so.
Well, I think too, one of the things I'll add too is is if you have just one person in your life that you can be open and honest and vulnerable with, think of it kind of too as an accountability partner. Because, sometimes we can't do life alone. That's why I think relationships are people, and people are the most important part of your life, is that when you find and engage with people and you realize, you have a big network of people that care about you, they're going to help you and they're going to lift you up. And don't ever feel that you have to take this journey alone, ever. So I think for me, just having a great network and great kind of group of people here at the Academy, they're the ones that help me. And, I can't say that there are days that go by and I don't struggle, because I think everyone struggles, no matter what, no matter how great you want to say you are, how happy you are. Everyone has their self-doubts. But, find people and surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you and that are positive. Because there's a saying that you're like the 5 people that you spend the most time with, something like that. So make sure too, if you feel down, ask yourself if you're around negative people. And if you are, then kind of change that group. Because once you start surrounding yourself with positive people and you change that positive mindset, there's nothing you can't do. And if you have people that don't support you, then, they shouldn't be in your life. But once you find those people that support you, you're really going to feel like there's nothing that you can't do. And if you fail, keep failing, because that's the greatest part of life. It's the best lesson. No matter if it's a company or a startup or whatever, and you lose money, just think of it as a lesson. That's all.
That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. I want to end with a little bit of fun. I have some Maine trivia. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So, any final words before we get into trivia? Any final alibis?
No final alibi. My laptop is at 3%. I don't have a charge.
That's cool. We'll make this really quick. All right. We'll go through. There'll be a little bit of geography, but we'll test your Maine knowledge here. Okay. First one's super easy. Ready? Maine is most famous for this.
Lobster.
That's right. Good job. Very nice. Okay. Over or under? Maine has over or under 10,000 miles of rivers and streams?
Over.
32,000 miles of rivers and streams in Maine.
I think Maine also has the longest coastline. If you were to kind of straighten it out like a string, I think it's longer than California. Don't quote me on it.
No, I think it is. So I'm on visitmaine.net is the website. So if any of this is inaccurate, you have to go to visitmaine.net. That's where your issue is. But I do think they say the coastline is the longest. Okay. This group of people are believed to have discovered Maine 1,000 years ago.
Well, Maine was Massachusetts, so I don't know.
We'll say the area. What group of people may have discovered Maine over 1,000 years ago, or approximately 1,000 years ago? Famous group, pillaging, plundering, discovering, explorers. The Vikings. The Vikings are believed to have discovered Maine. But yes, I agree. Maine wasn't Maine 1,000 years ago. So, okay. Over or under? Maine state population, over or under 5 million people?
It's under.
1.3 million, man. That's not a lot of people in Maine.
No, it's not that populated. I think I know that just because of the election. I knew how many people voted and kind of population. So
that's no fair. You knew that one going on. What is the Maine state animal?
It's a bird. It's a chickadee.
That is the state bird. The state animal is a moose.
Moose. Yeah.
It is the moose. Since we're on, what would be? Do you know what the Maine state fish is?
Is it a trout?
It's a landlocked salmon. Landlocked salmon.
That was my second guess.
Okay, just 2 more questions and then we'll wrap it up here.
I'm at 1% in case I lose you.
We'll do one more question. Here we go. You ready?
Yep.
What is the highest mountain in Maine?
Mount Katahdin.
Over or under 10,000 feet?
Under.
5,268 feet. Good job, Dylan.
Thank you.
Very nice job. Dude, it was an honor to talk leadership with you, talk life with you, philosophy, psychology. I wish you the best. Enjoy these last couple months that you have. Make the most of it. And please stay in touch. We'd love to maybe have a conversation down the road, maybe once you get to your new unit or whatever it is. So
absolutely. I'll be looking forward to it. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome. Remember, Leadosophy is about using the tools of philosophical thought to deepen our understanding of leadership. I think we did that today with Dylan. Dylan, we'll catch you next time, man. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks again.
All right, bye.
Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of Leadosophy. If you liked what you heard today, hit that subscribe button and check out Leadosophy.com and learn more about Tim's ideas on philosophy and leadership. We'll see you next time.